In working with 3,000 plus successful career driven women over the last 10 years, here is something that sabotages so many in their health and fitness journey. And it really boils down to trying to make too many changes at once. And this isn't necessarily your fault because there's so much information, right? No matter what you think might be right, you could probably find just as many resources around why that's wrong. You could watch something that says too much water is bad for you. So there's a lot of conflicting information out there, and there's just a lot of information in general where it's like you have to do this, you must do this, here's a change you have to make, this is a must, this is important, this is vital if you want to be successful. You're constantly being inundated with that type of information, whether you're scrolling, watching YouTube, TV, whatever the case may be, right? And when I first started this almost a decade ago at this point, I was guilty of this too. I think sometimes in fitness, people that look good have a lot of confidence, and with that confidence sometimes comes ego. So I thought that every woman that we worked with had to know everything I needed to know, when in reality, it's like that quote, they just needed to know what they needed to know, right? And we felt like we had to do so much, so much. And what I mean by this is I speak into a lot of women where they will join a program or do something, and it almost is more overwhelming than when they started. Matter of fact, most times it is. And what I mean by this is they go from this way of life that they've done for so long to come into a program that tries to make 15 adjustments at once. You go from eating 2 meals a day to 6. You spend time, very little time before cooking. Now you're like meal prepping 2 or 3 days a week. You went from not really working out at all to working out like 5 or 6 days a week. You now start your morning with like lemon water. You have to take this supplement at this certain time, and all these things. And there's like 15, 20 adjustments in your everyday life that just before you were joining that program, you weren't doing. And that leads to a lot of overwhelm, that leads to a lot of complexity, and a confused person is not going to take consistent action. Oftentimes, a lot of big changes at once could lead to results, but they tend to be temporary. If your focus is making small adjustments over time, the results might be a little bit slower, but that will be much more sustainable for you in the long run because it feels more natural. So many programs have you make 10, 15, 20 different adjustments to your day-to-day life right away, and there's just no way that you can sustain that. Think of like the little small adjustments that you can make that you can be most consistent with. Let me give you some examples. So maybe a woman likes to eat ice cream that we're working with. She eats some Ben and Jerry's, a entire pint, once or twice a week. A lot of calories, right? Well, maybe instead of eating the Ben and Jerry's, we have her, she finds a couple Halo Top flavors that she really enjoys. Halo Top has roughly 4 to 5 times less the calories than Ben and Jerry's. So if we get her into that habit of replacement, she's saving an extra 3,000 to 3,500 calories per week that she was using by eating the regular Ben and Jerry's, right? Maybe a woman uses regular creamer in her coffee every morning, and she puts, home field advantage pour in there, and there could be another 150, 200 calories. Well, maybe instead of using the Italian sweet cream with sugar, we go to a sugar-free option where she uses the same amount, but there's only 10 to 15 calories. That over the course of a week is an additional 700 calories that you can utilize, and that puts her into a deficit, right? Somebody maybe gets 8,000 steps in per day on average, and they join our program. We go from 8 to 10 or to maybe to 12,000 steps per day. The compounding of that over a week, a month, 2 months makes a huge, huge, huge difference. So I think sometimes we work with women who put a lot of pressure and stress on themselves, and they believe that they have to make all these changes to see progress and to see results. And I'm here to tell you that it's really these minor adjustments and changes within your everyday life that lead to the biggest outcome and the results that you desire for yourself. It really does. And one of the things that just exploded our client results with us, where so many programs almost want to pretend they're in the military and just boss and order you around and say, hey, you must do this, you have to do this, it has to be this way, or the highway type of thing. we meet women where they're at. Like, we want to understand their life, their day to day, their week to week, what foods they enjoy, how many meals a day is realistic. When they go out to eat, where do they go? Because it has to feel natural for them. And then once we understand their day to day, their week to week, and then we'll come in as an overlay with their coach and start making adjustments on top of that. For example, this is recent. A woman that we brought into our program here recently, she was talking about how she would really hit a wall at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And working with her coach and seeing her nutrition, we noticed that she had quite a few carbs earlier in the day. So we said, okay, let's come in, let's bank your carbs for later in the day. Let's focus in on more protein based food choices and snacks early in the day. Let's stay away from, carbs, especially simple carbs like bagels and croissants and things like that, donuts, sugary coffee, and drinks from Starbucks. And let's just focus it on having pure protein earlier in the day. And she did that. And then her coach said, hey, I want you to let me know 3, 4, 5 o'clock to see how your energy is scale 1 to 10 over the next week. Just shoot me a text and let me know. And her energy was terrible, like 1 or 2 out of 10, which isn't good. And then just making this small adjustment, she said, my energy 7, 8, 9 out of 10 now. Just making that one small adjustment. So when we bring in a woman, they're obviously eager and motivated to make a change. There's something that comes with investing in yourself. You're raising your hand and signaling to the universe that you're worth it and you're ready to make yourself a priority. So they come in super, super motivated. So they're sometimes perplexed why we'll say this, but oftentimes in the first week of working with a woman, we don't really want her to make any changes at all, especially nutrition wise. And the reason that we do this is because we want to see what she typically does. Now, if this woman is eating a large pizza multiple times a week and then she joins our program, is she probably going to do that anymore? No, because she's in a season of her life where she invests in this program and she doesn't want to do that. But what we do see is she a breakfast eater? What does she typically have? What does she make for snack choices? What time of the day does she tend to eat? Where does she go out on the weekends? How are the weekends different than during the week? Is she consistently eating the same amount of food every day? Or is it like a lot of food one day, then starves herself for a couple, then more food? We can kind of see these patterns, and it doesn't take long. It takes 7 to 10 days. And we'll look at a woman, what she typically does. And then once we see that, we understand that's the foundation of what feels natural to her. That's what she has always done. So then we can come in and focus in on one area. It might just be in working with a woman, the first couple weeks, we see what she's doing, and we're just going to focus on cleaning up her snack choices. She's not having snacks that are the highest quality, that are making her hungrier later on. It's causing her energy to crash. So we might say, hey, let's exchange X for Y at this time, and then let's exchange this snack for this time. Let's change the timing of when you have this snack, right? And when we do that, it feels much more natural, and it leads to consistency, and it leads to sustainability, because we're just taking what this woman has done for a long time and then making small adjustments on top of it. So my point of sharing this is, and kind of the key takeaway is, you don't need to think you need to reinvent the wheel and completely 180 your life. And what I mean by that is going from eating a couple meals today to think you need to eat 7 or 8 small meals. Go from not cooking at all or making really simple things to think you have to spend 8 hours in the kitchen. Because if you don't like cooking or you don't have the time for that, yeah, you might be able to motivate yourself and do it for a couple of weeks, but there's no way that you're going to be able to do that long term if you really don't like cooking and time is limited for you, right? So think of those things in your everyday life, that small adjustments could make huge, huge difference. And sometimes you overlook these things. Like I said, just the creamer in your coffee, like little things like that, where you're maybe using regular creamer that you put a lot in there, and it's an extra 200 calories you're having per day. Well, if you give that up, that's a huge, that's a huge win, right? So my point of sharing this is to understand that to get to where you want to be, you don't need to make all these drastic changes that you're led to believe first and foremost. And just take a step back from yourself and look at your week to week, your day to day, and think of some of these little minor adjustments that you'd be okay with, little adjustments that you can make. Because if you do that and then you're consistent with it, it leads to big changes over time.